It is so wonderful to see you here from wherever you are and whenever you are. So we have people on this call from, I think, most continents. So here's what we're going to do today. I'm going to begin with just a few words about what happiness studies is as a field, and then I will jump into the topic of today's presentation, which is around how to deal with the mental health crisis, with the burnout, and how to replace those with sustainable well-being. And I'm going to give you just a few ideas from the science of happiness. Then about half an hour, 40 minutes into today's session, I will share a video with you, which has Yuval Kutz, who's the president of the Happiness Studies Academy, talking about the certificate in happiness studies. Then one of our graduates, Livia, is going to talk about her experience and how she's applying happiness studies in her career. And then we open it up for your questions. And your questions can be about the presentation that you will watch today or listen to. It could be about any topic within the field of happiness, broadly defined, or it can be about the certificate program or the master's program or the PhD program that we offer through the Happiness Studies Academy. So this is what the next hour and a half or so will look like. So let me begin with saying a few words about the field of happiness studies and how it emerged, because it's a relatively new field. So in 2015, just over 10 years ago, I was on a transatlantic flight. And I don't know if you're familiar with those sensations and feelings when you're on a flight, exhausted, but so uncomfortable that you don't fall asleep. I was in one of those states. And suddenly a question came to mind when I was sort of in the in-between state, half awake. And a question came to mind. And the question was, how is it that there is a field of study for psychology, which is what I had been doing, and philosophy and history and medicine and biology and geography and theology and you name it. And there's no field of study for happiness. Yeah, there is positive psychology, but that's just the psychology of happiness. What about what philosophers have to teach us about happiness, and theologians, and neuroscientists, and economists, and historians? And what about what film and literature has to teach us? Why isn't there a field, or rather an interdisciplinary field of study that brings together the wisdom from the ancients and from the moderns and integrates it into a whole? Integrates it into a field that answers a simple question. How can we become happier? How can we spread happiness? And on that flight, at that moment, I resolved to help create such a field of happiness studies, an interdisciplinary approach to the study of the good life. On that flight, I was no longer tired. I was completely awake. And I've been working on this for the past 11 years with some remarkable colleagues from across the world. The purpose of the field of happiness studies, again, is very simple: to help us become happier, to help others become happier. Why? Because happiness is good in and of itself. I mean, we all want to be happier. We all want the people we care about to become happier. But it's not just as an end in itself, it's also as a means towards an end. So beyond the fact that it feels good to feel good, if you increase levels of happiness by a little bit, and by a little bit, I mean 3, 4%. In fact, today you're going to get some tools, some techniques that can help you do just that. So if you increase your levels of happiness by a little bit, you become more creative, more innovative. You become more engaged, more motivated, whether you're a school teacher, a manager, a parent, a medical doctor, a lawyer. Your teamwork, your ability to work together with others. Again, whether you're in a business or in a school or in any other kind of organization, your ability to work together with others actually improve. In fact, generally, your relationships get better, personal as well as professional. You become more productive. You become overall more successful. There's actual research showing the direct link between increasing levels of well-being and the profitability of a business or the performance in school of students and faculty alike. So there are all these benefits to happiness. It's a field worth pursuing. This is what we're doing. This is what we have been doing for the past 8 years since the Happiness Studies Academy was found. And I'm going to share with you today some of the work that we have done. But before that, is what I'd like to do is share with you a brief presentation, and I'm going to share some PowerPoint slides with you around the topic mental health, burnout, and sustainable well-being. I want to start with some statistics from around the world. And these statistics are for the most recent ones that we have from 2025. So 34% of employees, and this was done by Gallup looking at just about every country in the world, on average, 34% of employees in organizations are thriving, for profit, not for profit. 52% are experiencing burnout. So more than half of employees worldwide are experiencing burnout with all the implications thereof, whether it's psychological implications or physiological implications. And therefore, sick days have nearly doubled in 7 years. Look, these statistics, by the way, are unheard of in the history of psychology since we started measuring these variables. And listen to this. 84% of workers experienced a mental health challenge in the past year. Why is that? So there are various reasons. One of the culprits, one of the enemies, enemy number one, so to speak, of mental health, the number one cause of burnout, at least as is cited by most people, is stress. Here are some of the headlines from newspapers around the world around stress. So more and more doctors are talking about stress as the silent killer. More and more managers are citing stress as the number one reason why employees leave for turnover, why they're underperforming, why they're missing days at work. More and more schools are pointing to stress as the problem among their children. And we're not just talking high schools or universities. We're talking elementary schools as well, where stress levels and associated mental dis-ease are pervasive, whether it's depression or anxiety. And the question is, and what I want to address today, is this seeming underlying cause of the mental health pandemic that we are experiencing, of the rising levels of burnout that we're seeing across the world. So how do we deal with that stress? What do we do about it? I want to talk about three different approaches, and they're different, but they're interconnected for dealing with stress. The one is to re-experience stress. The second is to introduce recovery from stress. And the third is to reframe stress. So it's re-experience, recover, and reframe. And I'm going to elaborate on each one of these approaches. Now, before I elaborate, what I'm going to talk about are very practical tools and techniques that you can use, that you can introduce in your life today, professional life or personal life, that you can help your children incorporate in their lives, that you can help your colleagues incorporate in their workday. So think about these as practical tools and see whether, or rather how, you can apply them in your life. So let's begin with the first R, re-experience. Now, when people talk about stress, they usually think about it as something that they would, as quickly as possible, get rid of. I mean, it's unpleasant. It hurts. Some people feel it here, in their constricted throat or in their belly or shoulders, and it's unpleasant. So common sense would tell us, all right, I'm experiencing it now. Let me just get rid of it. But there is a paradox at play here. That actually, when you allow yourself to experience stress, so rather than push it away, say, bring it on. Let me re-experience it. When you give yourself the permission to be human, because experiencing stress is human. And it doesn't matter what job you're in, and it also doesn't matter what age you lived in, whether it was 5,000 years ago or whether you're with us today. Stress has always been part of the human condition. So allowing ourselves to experience it actually makes it, in the long term, more likely to go away. The paradox here is that when I try to push away stress, or by the way, for that matter, sadness or anger or envy or any other painful emotion, when I try to push it away, it intensifies, it grows stronger. In the words of the renowned Swiss psychologist Carl Jung, what you resist persists. And when you allow the emotion to be experienced and re-experienced, it actually eventually just goes away, leaves just as it came. Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, one of the most important books of the 20th century, talks about paradoxical intentions. So I'll give you an example of where he recommends using paradoxical intentions. So most people, about 80% of the general population, say that they experience some form of public speaking anxiety. So when they're told you have to give a speech, you have to give a lecture, you have to give a presentation, especially if it's an important audience for you, or maybe an audience that you're not that familiar with, you will experience public speaking anxiety in all likelihood. So how do you deal with it? Well, many people say to themselves, I don't want to experience this anxiety. It's unpleasant. It lowers the level of my performance. I want to get rid of it. But remember, what you resist persists. So what does Viktor Frankl suggest? The exact opposite. He said, it's not enough that you're experiencing it. I want you to re-experience it. Not only that, I want you to re-experience it at a higher, stronger intensity. And he even suggests through self-talk to tell yourself, I'm not anxious enough or I'm not stressed enough. Come on, this is an important presentation. I want to get even more, become even more stressed, even more anxious. Paradoxical intentions. By doing so, you're not fighting it, you're welcoming it. You know, there's a beautiful poem by Rumi, written 800 years ago or so, called The Guest House. And in The Guest House, Rumi talks about inviting in, welcoming all emotions, not pushing them away, inviting them into your home as if, and I quote, they're envoys from the beyond. Now, I don't know if they're envoys from the beyond or not. That's above my pay grade. But what I do know is that when we welcome these emotions, such as stress, they do come in and then they leave and they do not overstay their welcome. Now, why is that important to do? You see, when you experience stress, or for that matter, any other painful emotions, there are two levels of the psychological pain that you can experience. The first level is the natural automatic one. So again, for most people, when they hear, when they know, when they're about to give a public presentation, they experience stress. Anxiety levels go up. That's natural. Part of the human condition. We care. We care about what other people think. We want to make a good impression. We want to influence, convince people, or whatever the purpose of our presentation is. It matters to us. And therefore, anxiety levels go up. That's level one, automatic. Not much we can do about that. But then, when we reject or attempt to reject these emotions, saying to ourselves, don't be anxious, don't be nervous, don't be stressed, immediately, automatically, that stress, that anxiety goes up. That second level. Level one, inevitable. Not much we can do about it. Level two is a choice. Because once I accept and re-experience that stress, not only do I stay here in the long term, and long term can be a minute or an hour, it actually goes down. First level, automatic. Second level happens when I reject. The antidote to this rejection is acceptance, embracing the paradoxical intentions that Viktor Frankl talks about. By the way, this doesn't just apply to us, it also applies to the way we raise children or the way we manage an organization. So if I tell, if my child is angry and I tell them, don't be angry, what I'm doing is only making things worse. Whereas if I let them experience the anger, of course, put boundaries on their behavior because not every behavior is acceptable, but allow them to experience the anger because we should not put a limit on emotions. That anger will go away just as it came. Tears, by the way, crying is a way of expressing emotions rather than suppressing, giving ourselves the permission to be human rather than denying the emotion. Talking about emotions is another way of expressing rather than suppressing emotion, giving ourselves the permission to be human rather than rejecting emotion. So this is re-experiencing. It's the first step, healthy step for dealing with stress. Let's get to the second R, which is recover. One of the things that seem obvious in hindsight, but we don't think about sufficiently, is that stress can help us grow. Not only can it help us grow, as we'll see momentarily, it's an essential component of growth. Think about a very simple analogy. You go to the gym and you lift weights. What are you doing when you lift weights? You're stressing your muscles. Is that a bad thing? Not at all. You go to the gym, you lift weights, and 2 minutes after that, you lift the same weights. And then after 2 days or 3 days, you go back to the gym and you do the same workout. And 3 days after that, you do that again. And over time, you actually grow stronger, bigger, healthier, better. In contrast, if you go to the gym and all the weights are on zero and you do not stress your muscles, you don't grow. So that stress is actually necessary, essential for growth, whether physical or psychological, it turns out. And it turns out that what healthy, happy, and successful people do is they experience stress just like everyone else does. Again, it's part and parcel of being alive. A natural human experience, common to all of us. But what they also do, those people who grow, is they introduce micro, mid-level, and macro level recoveries into their lives. What does that look like? For example, micro recovery could be taking 5 minutes for meditation. It could be taking 30 seconds for deep breaths with your eyes closed. It could be going to the gym for an hour or 20 minutes. It could be having a cup of coffee with a friend. It could be having a meal with your family, but not a meal when your phone is on and you're doing work at the same time. That's not recovery. That's simply more stress. So recovery can be physical exercise, it can be meditation, it can be meeting friends, it could be reading, it could be going for a walk in the park. It could be watching a sitcom. And once you have that recovery with the stress, that leads to growth. Just as, this is important, if you go to the gym without recovery, meaning you just lift weights all the time, without the day off, without the 2, 3 minutes off between sets, you will get injured. Similarly, in life, without these small recoveries, you will get injured. What does injury look like? Burnout, which millions, and I'm not exaggerating, billions of people around the world are suffering from, not because of the stress, but simply because they don't have enough recovery. So I talked about recovery on the micro level. There's also recovery on the mid level. That would be taking a day off, for example. Even God needed a day off. So I think there is an important message here for us mere mortals. Or getting a good night's sleep consistently is a form of mid-level recovery. So micro-level recovery could be 30 seconds, 5 minutes, maybe an hour. Level recovery could be a night, a full day or two. And then there is macro-level recovery. That's your vacation, the week long, a month long. And we need those recoveries if we are to turn stress into growth. Because the point is that stress without recovery leads to injury, whether it's in the gym or at work or at home. Stress without recovery leads to injury, to burnout. And as is evident by the statistics I shared a few minutes ago, most people don't have enough recovery because stress with recovery leads to growth. The micro level, the mid level, and macro level. What I recommend my students, and when I say my students, I mean people who are taking the certificate program or the PhDs or MA program, or managers in organizations, is create a daily structure where you punctuate your crazy busy schedule, because most of us have crazy busy schedules, with islands of sanity. Those islands of sanity are the micro, mid, and macro levels of recovery. And when you have that recovery, that's when you are using stress as a vehicle for growth. We need it. Children need it. Why do you think we're seeing the numbers that we're seeing in elementary school in terms of burnout, anxiety, depression? Because kids are put on a certain track and they're told you need to fulfill all these requirements so that you can get into a great high school. And when they get into that great high school, they have to fulfill more requirements to get into that great college without thinking about their mental health. Now, thinking about their mental health doesn't mean that they don't experience stress. It's okay that a 10-year-old experiences stress. Again, part of life, even healthy. Remember, going to the gym, you need stress for growth. What's unhealthy is that they don't get time for recovery. And by the way, being on the phone, doom scrolling, or social media, that's not recovery. In the long term, that simply adds more stress. What does recovery look like? Play a sport, go hang out with friends, be bored. Kids can't tolerate boredom today because each minute they're bored, immediately the screen comes to the rescue. One of my close friends is a child psychologist, and her kids sometimes say to her, because she does limit screen time, they say to her, "Mommy, I'm bored." And what's her response? "That's okay, sweetie. Just be bored with dignity." So, time for recovery, that's the key. Re-experience, recover. Here is the third R, which is incredibly, as you'll see in a minute, important for recovering from stress. And that is reframe. There's wonderful research by Joe Tomaka, a renowned psychologist, who addressed individuals with test anxiety. Again, very similar to public speaking anxiety. In fact, there is a very high correlation between the two. So people who experience test anxiety before going into an exam, stress levels go up automatically. Again, first level of the psychological pain. So he identified people who are documented as experiencing high levels of stress anxiety. And he randomly divided them into two groups. First group, go forth and take the test. And people who take tests and they have test anxiety perceive the exam, the test, as threatening. That's why they're anxious. Whether it's threatening to their ego, to their self-esteem, they're thinking how they will be perceived, they're thinking about their future, whatever it is, they're seeing it as a threat. So group one, he did nothing. He just let them take the test. Group two, he asked them to do the following. He said, look at this test as a challenge. One word, challenge. So what he did, or what he helped them do, is reframe the upcoming experience, taking a test, from being a threat to being a challenge. That one word changed so much. When he tested their physiology, for example, how much cortisol, that's the stress hormone, how much cortisol they actually released, they released less cortisol as a result of simply changing that one word from a threat to a challenge. It didn't just affect their biology, their chemistry, it also affected their performance. They did better on the test. They reframed it from being a threat to being a challenge. It's actually quite remarkable, and there's a lot of research on this, how much one word, how much of a difference one word can make. Do I see it as threatening or do I see it as an opportunity? Do I see failure as a disaster or do I see it as a learning opportunity? So, reframing from a threat to a challenge. There's another form of reframing, which is arguably even more powerful. Some of you may be familiar with the work of Kelly McGonigal. She teaches at Stanford University. And what she talks about is the research showing how important your mindset regarding stress is. Meaning, whether you see it as harmful or helpful. So, one of the things that I just did a few minutes ago is try to convince you that, hey, stress is actually potentially helpful, right? It can help you grow, whether it's physically or psychologically. And people tend to have, certainly in the West, negative perceptions around stress, that it's bad for us, that it's harmful, that it's the cause of all those terrible statistics that I shared earlier. But it turns out that our perception of stress, whether we see it as harmful or helpful, whether we see it as hurting us or potentially helping us, can make the difference. And I'm not saying what I'm going to say lightly, can make the difference between life and death. So for a period of 8 years, psychologists and medical doctors studied people with positive perception of stress and people with negative perception of stress. So they identified people who experience stress in life, not difficult. And they then divided them into two groups based on their perception of stress. Do they see it as harmful or potentially helpful? During those 8 years, what they found was that those who saw stress as harmful were more likely to die. In fact, and they did this in the United States, they estimate that approximately 182,000 people in the United States died during those 8 years because their perception of stress was stress is harmful. 182,000 people experienced premature death because of their perception of stress. Let me share with you another study that actually shows a coherent and clear causal relationship. Alia Crum, professor at Stanford University, did the following study, went into an organization that was a high stress environment. And she divided the employees randomly into two groups. One group, continue working as you've been doing until now. Their perception, most people's perception, was that stress was harmful. The other half, she showed them a very brief video, 15 minutes, where she convinced them that actually stress can be helpful, that stress is enhancing, specifically that it can help you grow, as I just talked about briefly, that it can actually help you focus better, that it can actually improve your performance potentially, that it can actually boost your energy levels and make you more resilient. So for 15 minutes, you convince them that stress has the potential to help you. As a result of those 15 minutes, these employees, compared to the first group, showed less physical symptoms, meaning they got sick less often. They had more energy. They were overall happier. They were able to focus better. Their overall performance improved. So we can reframe stress and understand that it can be good for us. So these are the three elements. Re-experiencer, just let yourself experience the stress. Not a bad thing. It's natural. And when you do that, you don't go to the second level. Moreover, you overcome it. Create periods of recovery in your life. Whether it's the 30 seconds of deep breathing with your eyes closed, focused, whether it's that meal without the phone on, or going to the gym, or that cup of coffee where you savor the taste. And then reframe. See stressful situations as challenging. They are. Giving a public presentation is challenging, even after 35 years of doing it. And learn to see stress as potentially enhancing, as helping you to grow, become more resilient, more energized and focused. Stress is not the enemy. If anything, lack of recovery is the enemy. If anything, seeing stress as only harmful is the enemy. And the antidote to that is acceptance. It's re-experiencing, it's recovering, it's reframing. I want to end with a further exploration regarding the importance of stress. So, first example that I gave, and again, the best analogy that I know of is our muscles, our physiological system. Again, imagine a life where you do not stress your muscles. In other words, you lie in bed like a vegetable. What would happen to you stress-free? You would grow weaker and weaker literally by the day, sicker and sicker by the day. That's not a life that we want, not physically nor psychologically. And the second example, second analogy that I want to give you is at macro level, has to do with the world, has to do with nature in general. I want to share with you a story from Biosphere 2. What's Biosphere 2? Some of you may be familiar with it. Let me begin with Biosphere 1. Biosphere 1 is our very own beloved Earth. That's Biosphere 1. What is a biosphere? It's a closed, self-contained system, self-generating. It survives on its own with hardly any intervention from the outside. You know, the atmosphere is closed, nothing comes in except for light, of course. But other than that, there is oxygen here, there is hydrogen here, there is CO2 here, there are plants, there's water, there's algae, there are people, there are animals, and it is self-sustaining. Again, right now we're pushing it, right, with all the pollution. But generally, it is a system that is able to sustain itself by itself without external interventions. So what scientists wanted to do was imitate the Earth's environment, and they created Biosphere 2, a self-contained unit in the desert of Arizona. This is what it looked like from the outside. So sort of like a bubble where light comes in, but nothing else. They literally closed it off. No air came in. No water beyond the initial water that they put there came in. And they wanted to see whether they could create or recreate the Earth's environment there and make it self-sustaining without any external intervention beyond what they put in initially. And here is what they put in initially. This is what it looks like on the inside. It had plants, it had water, it had people living there. They focused, of course, on recycling. And they tried to create a self-sustaining. Now, why did they try to create a self-sustaining environment? Because they said, the scientists said, if we can do that, we can basically take this and put it on Mars or the moon and create human colonies. Self-sustaining. The experiment actually failed because what they found was that over time there was less and less oxygen. And again, just by a little bit, but enough for it to mean that it's not sustainable, certainly if you put it on another planet. But they're learning and they learned a lot. This is what, experiments are not conducted only to succeed because you learn from failure. So they learned many important things as a result of it. And maybe Biosphere, 7 will be successful. But here is one thing that they learned, which is relevant to our discussion. On Biosphere 2, as you can see in the picture, they planted trees, new trees. They watered them. They put fertilizer in the sand, and the tree grew. It flourished, it blossomed, and then it grew some more, and some more, and some more. But then it got to a certain height. And when it got to that height, the tree quite literally fell over, broke, couldn't sustain itself. So they planted more trees and they grew higher and higher. And then they got to that height, same height, boom, fell over, broke. They changed the fertilizer, the amount of water. They tried different techniques, tools. It got to that height, fell over, broke. And they didn't understand why. They thought they were doing everything right until they understood why. Because on Biosphere 2, the trees broke. Because on Biosphere 2, there was no wind. Because on Biosphere 2, there was no wind. In other words, when the tree was growing, becoming higher and higher, taller and taller, it wasn't challenged. It didn't experience stress. And without the challenge, without the stress, without the struggle, it did not grow strong enough to sustain the height. Whereas on Biosphere 1, Earth, there's always wind. The plant is always challenged. And as a result of that challenge, as a result of that stress, the plant grows stronger. Specifically, two things. It grows deeper roots and it grows a stronger trunk. And without deep roots and a strong trunk, the tree, once it gets to a certain height, simply falls over, breaks. What a great metaphor. What an important metaphor, telling us that stress is essential for learning and growing. whether it's of a tree or a human being. And it shows us that stress is an important part of life, that we need to befriend stress, see it as potentially helpful rather than as harmful. Whether it's for our 7-year-old kid or for a 57-year-old manager. It's important for all of us. It's part and parcel of life. And when we learn to see it for what it is, as a necessary part of life, of learning, of growing, when we embrace it, then we're in a much better place to grow from it, to benefit from it, to become more resilient, to better able to deal with mental health issues, with burnout, and to enjoy sustainable well-being. We'll stop here. And again, if you have questions, we're going to have plenty of time for those, and you can ask any question about this presentation or about any other topic that you may be interested in. But before we get to the Q&A, I would like to share a video of Mr. Yuval Kutz, who is the president of the Happiness Studies Academy. And in this video, he will give you a sense of what the certificate in happiness studies is all about. And again, if you have questions about that, we're more than happy to answer those. So without further ado, here is Yuval Kutz.
Hello everyone, I'm so glad that you're here with us today, and I want to thank you for your interest in the Happiness Studies Academy and our incredible community. Our global network of students and graduates are eager to welcome each and every one of you. At the Happiness Studies Academy, HSA, we offer fully online programs including the world's first accredited master's degree in happiness studies and even a PhD in human flourishing. But today, I'm going to talk about our flagship program, the Certificate in Happiness Studies. This program has become the cornerstone of our academy. It has brought together thousands of students from around the globe who've not only learned about happiness, but have formed friendships, started businesses, and truly embraced what we call the happiness revolution. One of our students put it perfectly when she said, "Anywhere I go in the world, I always have a place to stay." This speaks to the deepest connections and sense of belonging that our community fosters. The certificate program is a year-long online journey that blends theory and practice. You will dive deep into our SPIRE model, covering spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional well-being. You will explore research-based insights and practical techniques that you can apply in a personal, communal, or professional way. The course has a weekly structure with 3 main components. The first component is pre-recorded lectures. These are delivered by Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar, who will guide you through the science and wisdom behind happiness. You will travel through different cultures and times, learning what the great thinkers of the world in the fields of psychology, neuroscience, arts, economics, and more have to say about living well. The second component is the weekly exercises and the educational content. We believe that happiness, like any other skill, requires practice. These exercises are designed to help you apply what you learn in a way that's meaningful and is transformative for you. The third component is the live sessions with Tal.
Hello, everyone, and welcome.
Every week we gather from all over the world for a 1.5 hour session with Tal. It's a time for sharing, learning, and connecting.
Wow, that's amazing.
We're also proud to offer this program in multiple languages. English, Chinese, French, Hebrew, Japanese, Portuguese, Spanish, and Vietnamese, so that it's accessible to as many people as possible.
HSA is not a certificate program. HSA is a community.
I signed up for the material, and the teacher, obviously world renowned and wonderful. What I didn't realize is that I was going to get a community that is so wonderful.
You also automatically become a member of our Alumni and Business Club, ABC. The ABC is a thriving network where you will receive mentorship, participate in specialized working groups, access business opportunities, join in-person events, and get access to the highlight of the year, our biannual in-person retreats in different locations around the world, where we learn, grow, dance, and get to know each other better. Most importantly, when you enroll, you get lifetime access to everything I just mentioned. The lectures, exercises, the most comprehensive bibliography on happiness available today, invitations to weekly live sessions with Tal, and more. Once you graduate, you will receive a certificate recognizing you as an HSA certified happiness trainer, so that you are ready to share what you've learned and help others on their own path to improving their overall well-being. Thank you once again for being here. I look forward to our journey together.
So again, if you have questions about the program, you will be able to ask them. But before we get to the questions, I would like to invite Livia, a friend, fellow journeyer, and a graduate of the certificate program. So good to see you, Livia.
Oh, good to see you, Tal. I'm watching this and I'm thinking, this sounds way too good to be true. But being on the other side now, I know it's not. So I'm really happy to be here to share a little bit about my experience with everyone today. So hello, everybody. I'm Livia. I'm joining you from Toronto, Canada. And I want to share with you how my work was shaped by my ambition to create opportunities for meaningful contribution while being a present mom to my 3 kids. What I learned through HSA has helped me start a new company, finish a book, and collaborate internationally on a very important topic today, youth and social media. So I was drawn to HSA, as you heard in that video. It was fun to see it. That was a couple of years ago when I was at one of the retreats. But I was drawn to HSA because it allowed me to add the scientific backing to practices that had already been very important and brought meaning and happiness to my life. And of course, the wonderful opportunity to learn directly from Tal. But it was a time in my life when I was transitioning from having ran my own marketing company for 15 years. And I was teaching entrepreneurship and marketing at Schulich Executive Education Center in Toronto, which I really loved teaching. But over time, I just felt a pull towards wanting to do something a bit more meaningful, teaching something that was closer to my heart. And as timing would have it, the world was transitioning to a newer reality post-COVID. And these concepts that we talk about in HSA, that we learn about, were needed more than ever for individuals and for organizations alike if they were to keep and maintain a happy and healthy workforce. But I didn't want to speak just about making positive changes from experience. I really wanted the confidence of a trusted framework. And HSA gave me that. Spire, which was briefly mentioned, it's at the core of Tal's teaching, and it quickly resonated with me. So the integration of spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional well-being really created the backbone of the programs that I created. And I started a company a couple of years ago called Prescribing Happiness. where through workshops and keynotes and outdoor retreats, which are my favorite, we get to take teams out and teach them the principles of how to live a happier life. The other thing was one of my greatest life dreams was to write a book, and the manuscript ended up being full of anecdotes about my search for more and more check marks in life in order to feel fulfilled. However, it wasn't until I was able to explain some of my realizations through the positive psychology lessons that I learned that I felt confident to go forward with publishing this book. And I'm happy to say I'm in the final stages of editing, and I will soon be publishing Stop Searching for Next. And I think that shift from chasing what's next, which we all tend to do, to appreciating, really appreciating what's already ours, was really crystallized for me during my time at HSA. And last and certainly not least, you heard me mention this in the video already, but the people that make up the HSA community, as I said, it sounds too good to be true, but it really is. They've added so much love and connection in my life that I couldn't imagine before joining. And my work in educating youth and parents about smart use of technology and social media is something I've been able to expand internationally because I'm able to work with motivated individuals, other HSA students from around the world. So to sum up, I couldn't say enough things, but I know we have to get to questions. It's always nice to get your questions answered. So I'm grateful to be here. Grateful to you, Tal, for building something that, you know, bridges science and humanity in a way that has really profoundly shaped my work and my life overall. So thank you.
Thank you, Livia. Very moving to hear what you have to say. And I just want to second what you said about the community. And again, I'm going to say this and then we'll open up for your questions. And if you have a question, just go below to raise hand and raise it, and then I will call on you. And I will also do my best to look at the chat and get questions from there. But if you want to ask me a question, we would love to hear your voice, to see you. Just put your hand up below. Click on that, on raise hand, and I will call on you. So going back to what Livia said, and you also heard me say this in the video, the Happiness Studies Academy is first and foremost, a community. Yes, if you join, you'll get a certificate or the MA or the PhD, and that's great and wonderful, and the material is really good. But you know, that's easy. I mean, how difficult could it be when you draw on the works of the leading positive psychologists like Marty Seligman or Sonia Lubomírsky, and you draw on the work of Lao Tzu and Aristotle and Helen Keller? Of course, the material will be good. That's the easy part. The more challenging part, and I think the more important part about the Happiness Studies Academy and joining one of the programs, is the community. Because the community is unique, it's special. As Livia said, it's supportive. There are very strong connections there. Like-minded and like-hearted people coming together and creating and spreading goodness and happiness. And we have groups that support one another in writing books, or in business, or creating a program, or in parenting. And we have those retreats. You know, when we put together the Happiness Studies Academy, we really had a very serious debate around, should the Happiness Studies Academy be 100% online? Should we offer hybrid courses, some online, but they also have an in-person element? Or should it all be in person? Meaning, should we, get a place, a space, a biosphere too of sorts, and get together and study there? And we ultimately decided, there are advantages and disadvantages to each model, of course. We ultimately decided to make it 100% online. For the obvious reason, because we wanted to reach as many people as possible. And we have students from over 100 countries, which would not have been possible, remotely possible, if we had also required actual residency in a physical location. However, we also knew that by making it 100% online, we were losing out on the value of face-to-face interactions. And while getting together for webinars on Zoom is nice and great, it's no substitute necessarily for the in-person, playing together in the same sandbox kind of interaction. So what we decided to do, so that we could have the best of both worlds, is create those retreats. And you saw it in the video, and you've all talked about it, and Livia talked about it. We created those retreats, which are completely optional, meaning if you want to participate in the certificate or even the PhD, you can do it from your home. You don't need to attend any retreat ever, meet anyone in person. However, if you do want to meet people in person, we have those retreats twice a year, different places around the world. Whether we had our last one was in Rio, in Brazil. The one before that was in Finland. The one before that was in Beijing, Lake Como, New Jersey, Mexico City, Cartagena. So literally around the world, and we'll continue having them. And those who want to attend, do. And those who can very often do. And if it's close to you, by all means, we have participants who've been to every one of the retreats all over the world. And they're remarkable, amazing experiences. In fact, at the end, we will share with you a quick video about what these retreats actually look like. Okay, let me respond to your question. So, Ariella, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much, Tal. I wanted to ask what you recommend. I love this program, and if I had the ability to do so, I would absolutely do it. But I want to ask you if you're in a situation that you don't have those breaks, and you don't have social, and you don't have any supporting anything, and the ability to do little breaks, the micro breaks is not so easy.
Yeah. So what do you do is the question.
Pack up, move home.
One of my colleagues, who's actually arguably the world's leading expert on stress, was invited by a New York trading firm to give a presentation on stress because they were struggling, and employees were leaving the workplace, citing stress as the cause. Burnout was skyrocketing, much higher than even national and international average. People were getting sick, probably associated with stress. So he comes in, gives a lecture. At the end of the lecture, and very similar to what I just talked to you about, very similar ideas. At the end of the lecture, the employees come to him and they say, "Doctor, we loved it. It's spot on, exactly what we needed. Now tell us, what do? We want prescriptions. And he said to them, okay, what I'd like you to do is every 2 hours, take a 15-minute break. During those 15 minutes, I want you to have a cup of coffee, or this was in New York City, so, walk around the block, go to the gym, do meditation, whatever. And they said to him, you're joking, right? And he said, I'm not. Why? They said, because we don't have 15 minutes. We're traders. We have to be on that screen all the time. You know what can happen on the world markets in 15 minutes? He says, wow. So, okay. He said, how about 5 minutes every 2 hours? They said, no. We eat our lunch in front of that screen. So he thinks for a few seconds and then he says, how about 30 seconds? Do you have 30 seconds? And they think for a few seconds and they said, yeah, 30 seconds we'll give you. What have you got? Tell us. He said, here's what I'd like you to do. What I'd like you to do, and I mentioned this earlier, he said, what I'd like you to do is every 2 hours, pause, stop for 30 seconds. During those 30 seconds, if you can, you don't have to, but if you can, close your eyes and take 3 deep breaths. 3 deep breaths. So it's about 5 to 6 seconds in, if you can, through your nose, and then 5 to 6 seconds out, either through your nose or your mouth, it doesn't matter. 5 to 6 seconds in, out, in and out. And they said, we'll do it. And then he said to them, no, but I don't want you to just do it today and tomorrow, because you remember that I was here. I want you to do it consistently. And they did. They created reminders around their office. The reminders for taking those breaths, for taking those deep breaths. And the reminders could be a poster on the wall with the word breath, or a screensaver, or their phone reminded them every 2 hours, or they wore a bracelet to remind them to take those breaks. Ariella, after 1 month, the organization looked, felt, and performed at a whole different level. Why? Because the problem was never the stress. The problem was always the lack of recovery. And once they introduced that recovery, and what do those 3 deep breaths do? They help them shift from the fight or flight stress response to what Herbert Benson from Harvard Medical School calls the relaxation response. And stress without recovery leads to breakdown, meltdown, burnout. Stress with recovery leads to growth. So, Ariella, if you tell me that you cannot take any time for recovery, not even 30 seconds, that's a problem. But if you have these very short breaks, opportunities for those pauses, even if they're just 30 seconds, there's a lot that you can do. Not perfect, not ideal, but it's a lot. One sentence which, Livy has heard me say 1,000 times, at least, is that small changes make a big difference when consistently applied. Small changes make a big difference when consistently applied. Remember what I said about this program, it's intensely practical, which means that it needs to be practical for everyone. And yes, some people have crazy busy schedules and cannot go to the gym 6 days a week and have lovely meditation breaks or strolls for hours every day or every week. So what do? Life's not perfect. We make do. We identify those small interventions. There are many of them. I call them MVIs, minimum viable interventions. There are many of them that we can incorporate in our day-to-day. And small changes, when consistently applied, make a big difference. Thank you for your question, Ariela. Victor.
Sí, buenas noches. Tengo una duda. Eh, ah,
Victor, 1 minute. If you're going to speak in Spanish, what I'm going to do is go to interpretation below and click on English. Go ahead.
I have a question. We were talking about recontextualizing stress, right? So that it doesn't become something negative. I have just finished college a year ago. I studied psychology, and my thesis was on stress. However, I I focused on the negative side of stress. It was academic stress, but I also found that there was some positive stress that I called eustress, and the negative side was regular stress. But in my bibliography, it mentioned that there was two kinds of reactions to stress. I focused on just two, and it said that the first one was calling to the search of information to recontextualize stress, and the other one was from direct action. But in itself, the first one was to look for a positive sensation to stress, and the second one was to. The second one, I didn't understand it very well because it talked about aggression, about assertiveness, about taking medication. So I didn't really understand if it was eustress, which was positive stress, or if it was regular stress. There were three kinds of stress. So, and the third kind was any kind of behavior that stress provoked. You got into a state of being frozen by stress. So how could we deal with stress? That would be my question.
Yeah. Thank you for the question, Victor. For the first thing I will do, the short answer is that I highly recommend reading Kelly McGonigal on stress. Specifically, her book is called The Upside of Stress. Or you can go online and she has a wonderful TED talk on the same topic, The Upside of Stress. And she explains the importance of how we perceive it. You know, throughout the program, the certificate program, there are a few main themes that I repeat over and over again. One of them is that small changes make a big difference when consistently applied. Another one is that our reality includes what's outside and what's inside. So, for instance, let's say I compete in a race, maybe the Winter Olympics, and I come in sixth place in downward slalom. And then there is someone else who also competes in a similar race and comes in sixth place. So both of us achieved the exact same external, objective outcome. But I see it as a disaster, whereas the other person may see it as a learning opportunity. In other words, the same external, objective reality, but a very different subjective interpretation. I'm going to be very disappointed. The other person is going to be quite happy. Why? Because our reality is not just what's outside. Our reality is also determined by our interpretation of what is outside. So reality is the inside with the outside together. The external outcome and the internal interpretation. Now, two people may be experiencing the exact same situation. Both people may experience stress as a result of it. For one person, it will be unhealthy stress. For the second person, it will be healthy stress, depending on their interpretation. And that's what psychologists, primarily in the West, most of them still do not emphasize, still do not fully understand. And this is why the research of Kelly McGonigal is so important, because it tells us that we have a lot of control over our experience of stress. We have a lot of control over whether that stress will help us grow or whether it will hurt us. So when we talk about healthy and unhealthy stress, we can't only talk about external circumstances, a challenging workplace or, a stressful job. Yeah, there are those too, and it matters. The external world matters. And, not or, and so does our internal interpretation of it. Now, can we, through our internal interpretation, control everything? No. If you put someone in the gym and you make them lift weights and more weights and more weights and more, and you don't give them any time for recovery, it doesn't really matter that much how they will interpret that stress, good or bad. They'll probably get injured. So there are certain toxic environments where unhealthy stress is basically inevitable. However, at the same time, we have a lot more control than we think. Because in most situations, we can re-experience, recover, and reframe. Not all situations, but in most situations, we have the freedom to do so. And when we do so, that can make all the difference. Thank you for your question, Victor. Giovanna, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening. I would just like to ask, how can we introduce this mindset to some people without sort of adding anxiety and guilt over that? Because from what I see, a very common side effect that might happen if it's not conducted properly is that the people start to feel guilty over, oh, but I'm feeling anxious, but I'm feeling sad. How do you think we can conduct this shift of mindset without creating more stress as a side effect of trying to change that mentality?
Thank you for this question, Giovanni. It's a very important one. What we need to do first and foremost is communicate that stress and every other painful emotion, again, whether it's anxiety or sadness or guilt is natural, part of being alive. And once we do that, it's sort of like the soil upon which we can help them, ourselves, flourish. So the first step to happiness is actually allowing in unhappiness. So the stress that they're experiencing, the guilt that they're experiencing, the sadness, they're part of being alive. Nothing wrong with it. On the contrary, it's not possible to get rid of it. That's the first thing. Then, how do we help them after we help them re-experience? How do we help them recover and reframe? Two ways. One, through science. Two, through stories. And sometimes science is the story. What do I mean by that? What did I do today? I shared research with you, whether it's Kelly McGonigal, whether it's Aaliyah Crum, whether it's Biosphere 2. And I also told it as a story. Biosphere 2 is a story. I hope that you will remember it, Giovanna, and I hope you will share it with others because it's an important story. So by combining the scientific and the storyline, you're increasing the likelihood, not guaranteeing, but is increasing the likelihood that you can help them if the foundation is acceptance. Our program, as I mentioned, focuses on two things. One, it focuses on helping us become happier. I say it openly, again, whether you're in the certificate or in the graduate programs, I hope that you're also there for completely personal and selfish reasons to become happier. And many, say the overwhelming majority, most of our students are also there because they want to help others become happier. Others being their family members or their employees because they know the benefit of increasing levels of happiness for performance, or their students or their coachees or their clients if they're therapists, or their patients if they're doctors. And we have many doctors. And we have mayors taking our program and introducing it on the city level. And all of them rely on, first and foremost, permission to be human. We're in this together. No one is exempt from painful emotions, from the challenges of life. And then they learn the science and they teach the science. They learn stories and they share stories, whether their own or more general stories of famous people or of their grandmother. Because stories put meat on the skeleton and they help us communicate our ideas. Thank you, Giovanna.
Thank you for your answer.
Let me take just a couple of questions from the chat, and then we'll put the video on. This is from Moises. I believe that mindfulness and the handling of the present moment contribute to the happiness concept and the optimizing of our well-being. Why is it, Tal, that you did not mention mindfulness? Moises, I didn't mention mindfulness because I had half hour to share with you. And if you take our program, you'll see that mindfulness is a very important part of the program. When we talk about happiness, we talk about 5 elements. There are the SPIRE elements. SPIRE. SPIRE is an acronym for spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional. Spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional. Spiritual well-being is about finding a sense of meaning and purpose in our life. It's also about being mindful and present. So that's the first element of happiness, spiritual well-being. Physical well-being, that's about exercise. It's about nutrition. It's about recovery that I did talk about today. And I talk about in much greater length in the program. So that's physical well-being, nutrition, exercise, recovery. Intellectual well-being is the I of SPIRE. That's about curiosity. Do you know that people who ask questions, who are lifelong learners, actually live longer and they're happier and more successful? Intellectual well-being is about deep learning, deep engagement, whether it's with text, with ideas, with art, with nature. So it's curiosity and deep learning. That's intellectual well-being. Then the R is relational well-being. Number one predictor of happiness, quality time we spend with people we care about and who care about us. This is why I said community is the most important part of the Happiness Studies Academy. So you will learn about all the research, or a lot of the research on relationships, whether it's romantic relationships or friendships or colleagues at work. Relationships are about kindness and generosity, which are very important elements of happiness. And finally, emotional well-being. That's about learning to deal with painful emotions. I talked a little bit about it today, permission to be human. And it's also about cultivating pleasurable emotions like gratitude and joy and love and excitement. So these are the 5 elements of happiness, and we go into greater depth in each of our programs, talking about, going back to Giovanna's question, talking about the science, sharing stories, learning how to apply these things with tools and techniques in our life, and learning how to help others do the same. I hope you join us. I've been doing this for the past 30 some years. I never grow tired of it because there's always more to learn, more to apply, more to improve, more to share. And I hope you join us so that you can experience not perfect, but more sustainable well-being. And I will end with sharing a video of the retreat experience, so you can get a little bit of a sense, sort of a teaser of what these retreats look like and feel like. In the meantime, wherever you are and whenever you are, take good care of yourselves and others. And I hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
To me, the word that comes to mind the most is connection.
Knowing very authentic and generous people from all over the world, for me, it was life-changing.
Get in here and you know you've got fantastic support in every which way possible.
And it's incredible the energy that we have here.
Didn't expect such a level of preparation, and it is just mind-blowing. You know, they are treating us like princesses and princes, or like I'm coming for the best date of my life.
People hug each other, they smile to each other, they support each other, which is amazing because this is not something you can learn. Such a passion towards other people can only come if you have the happiness in your heart and that you care for other people. And the HSI community is the community of people who care for others.